or whether if the West is going to take some action. But if the West enters or takes any action, that would mean escalation. So, Chaiti, for now, Ukraine in a very precarious situation. The unpredictability of what's going to happen next is palpable when it comes to conversations we have on either side. But the Russian side very clear that there can be no NATO expansion into Ukraine.
You know, Geeta, you mentioned that if West takes any kind of action, this only means escalation. Hold that thought right there. I'm taking this across to Gaurav, who's joining us from Warsaw. Gaurav, you heard Geeta right there. And any kind of escalation means it's going to be nuclear in nature. And that is the biggest concern. With the US President Joe Biden's visit now, where do things stand?
So US President Joe Biden is in Brussels. Very crucial meetings. He's heading to Poland on Friday. Now, these meetings become extremely crucial because it's an emergency meeting of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization countries in Brussels, the European Union summit, the G7, and then a bilateral with Poland's President Andrzej Duda here in Poland. Why is all of this happening? Because the Western bloc, the NATO bloc, is very concerned about this conflict entering day 29 and escalating. Their apprehensions are, what are countermeasures that need to be taken? So let's split the president's visit into three parts. One, humanitarian assistance to Poland, extremely crucial, with about 2.2 million refugees from Ukraine currently in Poland. More than 3 million people have been displaced in the past 28 days. So humanitarian assistance is one aspect. Empowering Ukraine, which means giving them more military hardware, that is the second prong of this very crucial visit. And the third, though long-term but equally crucial, is more NATO forces for the NATO bloc protection. So 4 battle groups move into this area from Hungary to Slovakia. You'll have more NATO troops and systems on ground. Apart from that, where we are in Warsaw, 300 kilometers from here, Chaiti, India Today's team visited a place called Mokre Zamość. Now, in Mokre Zamość, there are American troops already deployed. There are more American systems that are coming in. And this is barely 50 kilometers from Ukraine's border. So from air defense systems to radars to other military equipment, all of that is already being deployed. What does this indicate? Perhaps in the times to come, if this conflict escalates, then there are effective countermeasures that are already being put in place.
You know, this is something that we are going to be keeping a close watch on, Gaurav. And Gaurav, you know, reports earlier, we mentioned this on our channel as well, as to how US has a contingency plan which is ready in case Russia escalates this further, goes nuclear. So is the US ready to fight back in case Russia really crosses the line, whether it is you know, chemical weapons or whether it is nuclear weapons? What is the plan as far as the US is concerned?
So when this question was put to US President Joe Biden before he embarked on this visit to Brussels first and then Poland, he was asked this question: is the threat of chemical and biological weapons real? And he said, yes, it is very real. That is something that NATO countries would be discussing today, effective countermeasures. Now, when we talk about these effective countermeasures, some of the equipment is already coming in. And where we were, that indicates that that may be the route from where countermeasures for chemical and biological weapons, they go into Ukraine to defend Ukraine. Will that actually happen on ground? The allegations, President Zelensky has been saying that Russia is on the verge of using these weapons. There are already allegations that phosphorus bombs have been used or vacuum bombs have been used. The apprehension is biological weapons could be used. And that's an allegation that both Russia and Ukraine have put on each other. As of now, this meeting in...
Sanctions started to impact the common man in Russia.
Well, Chaiti, like we have been saying, one of the most sanctioned countries in the world is Russia. And therefore, the sanctions over here at a micro level in the domestic financial system has not impacted the people. The initial reaction of the people was to go to the ATM and start withdrawing money, and that's why there was a long queue when it comes to the ATMs. But now, because they see that the systems are in place and they are being able to use their own domestic cards of the Russian banks, and have faced no problems when it comes to groceries, supplies, their day-to-day living, vehicles, and going to office or schools, colleges, etc. So life has not been disrupted, so to say. The ones who had MasterCard, Visa, they faced problems in payments, but they've moved to the payment systems that are local to Russia. A lot of them were using Google Pay and other such platforms. They've moved to platforms which are Russian. Also remember, there are a lot of platforms that are banned in Russia or have been withdrawn from Russia, but a lot of youngsters over here still are being able to use the social media platforms via VPN or whatever methods they use. So life is not absolutely disrupted. They have a structure in place, but in the long run, once the global economy starts feeling the pinch and Russia starts feeling the pinch of the sanctions, we'll have to wait and see what will happen then to the Russian domestic economy.
And Geeta, shifting focus a little bit, as the conflict is entering the 29th day, I believe that Kyiv and Moscow have reached an agreement to establish 9 humanitarian corridors. If you could shed some light on that too.
Well, India is extremely close to Russia. Russia has been a special strategic partner for decades. Ukraine also feels close to India, and Ukraine expects India's help. And that is why India's stance has been very measured so far. India didn't oppose it. India abstained it. India didn't support the Russian resolution either. So India is very clear on dialogue and negotiated settlement. That is something that India is very clear about. When we were in Ukraine, the government, the people, they were upset with India's stance because they said that given the way China behaves at India's borders in Ladakh, and the fact that India is a stable democracy, they expected India to take a harder line on this. But then India also has to protect its strategic interests. And that's exactly why India has adopted the stand that we have on this. But on the humanitarian aspect of this crisis, which again would be very big in the US president's visit, 3 million people displaced at this point of time, 2.5 million or close to 2.2 million people currently in Poland. And that is where Poland requires a lot of humanitarian assistance. That is where, Poland is actually feeling the pinch already. Virtually every other street corner, there is a Ukrainian help center. There are people who are living in tents. There are people who've opened their homes and hearts for the people of Ukraine, giving them the benefit of healthcare system here and education system here. But all of that is actually impacting the infrastructure in this country, and that is why Poland's president, Andrzej Duda, also would want to hear from the US president on what are plans to assist Poland with these 2.2 million people who are currently Ukrainian displaced people who are currently in this country.
Absolutely. Gaurav Sawant, Geeta, Mohan continue to be with us. You can see on your screens our battery of reporters getting you all the sides of the story. Geeta from Moscow, Gaurav from Poland, and now we're taking this across to our soldier reporter, Rajesh Pawar, who's joining us from Ukraine. Rajesh, before you joined, just moments back, we broke the story on Ukrainian port Berdyansk, which has been set on fire, and Russia blew up fuel tanks in Berdyansk. What is the situation at the moment? All eyes on Brussels right now, and hold that thought right there. Gaurav Sawant is also with us. Gaurav, what is your sense in terms of Joe Biden's visit to Brussels is concerned? What are you expecting in terms of what is on the agenda? And then, of course, he's going to be in Poland as well for that very crucial meeting.
So Brussels is a very important leg of US President Joe Biden's visit, because here there's not only this emergency meeting of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's like within a week, they got all the NATO heads of state and governments to come together and discuss the road ahead. And the road ahead is not just restricted to assisting Ukraine. They will hear out the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky on what he requires to defend his country. And the thinking is, and these are some military analysts in the United States of America, also in Poland, who are of the opinion that they did not expect Ukraine to last out 28 days. They expected Ukraine to collapse, if not in the first 48 hours, but at least in the first week, 10 days. The fact that they've not only been able to survive 28 days, but also claim that they're striking back and pushing the Russian forces back in several areas, including from Odessa, for example, or from the outskirts of Kyiv, where just yesterday, Ukraine claimed that they'd regained about 7 kilometers of territory. Now, this pitched battle is an indication that the weapons that NATO countries are providing are actually helping Ukraine to fight back. So how can that be strengthened? $800 million worth of weapons are already on their way to Ukraine, including Germany now giving the Strela missile system, the Unlaw missile system, the anti-tank guided missile, the Javelin the anti-tank guided missiles, the Stinger surface-to-air missiles, the other systems that Ukraine requires. So $800 million worth of military hardware is being pushed in. Russia's threatened to target that route. They haven't targeted it effectively so far. So this is one part of the meeting. The second part of the meeting is how to protect NATO members in the years ahead, with 4 battle groups now headed to this region. Chetty.
Right, Rajesh Pawar is also with us. Rajesh, if you could also tell us what Ukraine looks like today after 1 month of being bombed, the devastation, the destruction trail. What does Ukraine look like before and after the war at the moment?
Look, as far as the city of Kyiv is concerned, it's almost deserted. People have all left the city. Huge humanitarian crisis all over the country. More than 3 million people now internally displaced or have become refugees in the nearby countries. Big cities like Kherson, Kharkiv, Sumy, and Mariupol have witnessed a lot of devastation over there, infrastructure damaged, a lot of civilian casualties in those areas. But we are seeing, as far as war is concerned now, after 1 month, Russia in control of almost entire coastline of Black Sea and Azov Sea, thus cutting off Ukraine from the sea. They have surrounded all major cities in the east and south of Ukraine, have surrounded all other major cities like Zaporozhye and Dnipro, which they have not occupied, where they have not entered so far. So we see that as far as east of Ukraine is concerned and south of Ukraine is concerned, Russia has achieved what it wanted to achieve. Now it is almost in control of 90% territory in Donbass, that's Lugansk and Donetsk Republic. Also, it has been able to have a land route, a land bridge between Crimea in south and Donbass in the north, which was the major objective to support Crimea, which holds the biggest naval base for Russia in that area. So we see that geopolitical games, the territorial games which Russia had in east of Ukraine have already been achieved. Now is question of political objectives is concerned. I think, as I said, it will depend on what is going to happen in Brussels today, what stance America takes and what stance NATO takes vis-a-vis Ukraine, either to supply them more military hardware and escalate the war, or try to pressurize Ukraine to go into some kind of negotiations. This will decide how far Russia can achieve its political objectives and how fast. Over to you.
All right, I request all of you to hold on with us as the threat of an all-out war in Europe is escalating. The United States has stationed its troops closer to the Ukrainian border. We visited Morke in Gimnia, Zamost County, which is barely 50 kilometers from Ukraine, where we saw American troops, Humvees, armored carriers and radar systems being deployed. Gaurav Sawant with this exclusive report.
The military tents that you see behind me are the new American camps that have come up. We are about 300 kilometers from Poland's capital, Warsaw. We are currently in a place called Mokre Jamosh. This is an airfield. And if you notice in this airfield, there are a number of tents that have come up. These tents are the new American airbase that's been set up in Poland. Now, there are a large number of American troops who are now deployed in this area. Now, if you look just behind me there, that entire green cover are American military tents. They have American military hardware, from armored personnel carriers to Humvees to certain radars that have been set up to troop carriers that have come up in this area. And they've come up from mid-March to now, and the numbers are increasing. This is an airfield. That's the airfield. This is the Mokre Jamosh airfield. This is barely 50 kilometers from Ukraine's border. And civilian movement in this area is now restricted. This entire area is not only barricaded, but you have American troops deployed at every entrance to this airfield. Now, are these American troops here as part of a North Atlantic Treaty Organization country NATO military exercise? They started coming here. The initial troops or the pioneers came in between mid to end February, and the larger number of troops are still coming in. We spoke to some of these soldiers, but they said they're not cleared to speak to media about the nature of the deployment or the duration of the deployment in Poland, close to the border with Ukraine. But there are radars that are here, there are Humvees that are here, and there are certain other military hardware that is coming in to this area, is what locals tell India today. US President Joe Biden is also to fly in to Warsaw for talks with Poland. Now, while that is a lot to do also with humanitarian assistance that will be provided to Poland for Poland looking after more than 2 million refugees who've come in from Ukraine. But Poland is also looking for additional military hardware, from surface to air missiles to fighter jets from the United States, and more troops on ground. America did commit to about 3,000 additional troops being sent here. 7,000 American troops as part of rotation are in the NATO territory right now. But Poland wants more to strengthen its security, especially with Russian missiles falling very close to Poland's border with Ukraine. With cameraman Lalit Joshi in Poland, Gaurav Sawant for India Today.